How's it going, everybody? Zach from Imperium Racing here with a fresh new video. Thanks for stopping on by. Today we're going to review wire repairs and the proper way, best way to do automotive wire repairs. This style of repair can also apply to some other things. I've actually used these same solder connectors and methods on a few house projects that I will throw in at the end of the video just so you can see that this works on many things. If you guys want to like or subscribe, that would be awesome. All right, let's jump on into everything you'll need to make the wire repair. Starting off, I have some cheap wire that I'm going to use just to show you the method. We have our wire strippers. These are made by Mac. I believe someone else invented this tool. I've actually seen a Mercedes version of this tool that was very, very, very old. So I'm not sure who came up with it first, but lots of people sell it. I'm sure you can also find other manufacturers of this tool, but it is a stripper and it strips on its own and automatically adjusts for wire gauge, which is pretty cool. Within a set range, of course. See that on there. You can also adjust for the length of strip right there at the top. The red piece slides back and forth, and that is the wire gauge that it will strip. To be honest, I've used this on a bunch of different sizes, and it's worked. Next, we have the Amazon Special, a couple of magnetic clamps to hold your pieces. I'll show you those in a minute here. Have our solder connectors that I love so much. These are also an Amazon Special. Discovered these through Mercedes, so they have their own version of this that, again, another thing I'm sure Mercedes doesn't make, but they sell. And these are the ones off of Amazon that are basically the same exact thing. Got some solder in the middle there, some sealant on the edges, and the whole thing is basically shrink tube. So solders it, holds the wires together by shrinking, and also seals out weather from your connection, which is pretty cool. Here we have the power probe, which is what we'll be using tonight to solder. You can also use a regular old heat gun if you have the big curved metal adapter for your heat gun, so that it evenly heats all the way around the wire. Obviously, this power probe has a bunch of different tips, solder, all kinds of stuff you can do with it. And final thing I have here I'd like to show you is some tape. I did touch on most of these things in my tool video if you have seen those. If not, check it out here. But this is a tape that, again, Mercedes sells but does not make. Obviously, it's made by Tessa. This is one I got from Mercedes. This is one I got from Amazon. It's the exact same tape. I'll link that below as well. Basically what it is electrical tape, but it's made out of more of a cloth material. So you can't rip this with your teeth. You do need scissors or something like that to cut it. But it is super strong. This does not rip as easily as electrical tape. And it looks very beautiful when you wrap a harness in this. It looks really, really clean. And kind of looks OEM factory once you're done. So, again, got my wire to show you guys, strippers, these clips to hold the whatever project you're working on. Sometimes it's in a weird area, you don't want to melt other parts of the car or other wires, so these are nice to keep everything out and in a spot you can work on it. Got our solder connector, soldering iron, and our tape to finish it off. Let's show you how it's done. Alrighty, since I'm not actually soldering on the car, I'm going to go ahead and use this vise to set up so that I can stick my magnets to it. And I do have a couple tricks and tips I will show you here. So first, let's go ahead and cut our wire. You know, I am missing one more tool. I do need dikes as well. You know, I did forget to bring home my regular dikes, so I'll just use the cutting edge on these pliers so we can chop off. That was close. I almost grabbed my my stereo connection there and cut that sucker in half. So it looked just like this. Wow. Anyways, let's go ahead and cut this here. And we'll solder this together and make a nice little bracelet. So wire cutters obviously are always nice. And your classic wire strippers you can use if you're used to them and you like them. I personally use these because they're quicker, easier, and perfect. So all you're going to do is go ahead and grab your end of your wire, feed it right into these two triangles, set it on the bottom. Again, you can set your depth if you want to with that red piece. If we move it forward, then we are stripping less wire off. I don't really usually move it. I'm just kind of leave it there and manually adjust where I want that. Again, we're in that bottom groove. This is going to close. It's going to cut through the insulation and then pull it back with one motion. Pretty sweet. And no, these automatic ones do not cut through the metal. Don't ask me how they do it, but different gauge wires, I have never had this tool cut through any of these. And you already know if it would have scored any of these, when I bend it, they would fall off. So we are good there. Alrighty, now that we have some nice clean metal to work with, I probably should have made this loop bigger just for the sake of the video, but that's okay. We're going to want to twist these up just a little bit so they're a little straighter. Before we position the second one, we can get ready to set up our solder connector. So the kit obviously comes with multiple different sizes. They do shrink down, so if it doesn't fit over the wire you're doing, then go for the next size up. This one's a little big, but I think this red one's going to be a little small. Yeah, that's not going to work for what I want to do here. So these solder connectors, most of them, it might change depending on brand, most of them are going to have a smaller side and a bigger side. It's a very small difference, it might be hard to tell on camera. Let's see if we can get a bigger one. It's kind of hard to tell. But they will have a smaller and a bigger side. So you do want to put the smaller side over your wire so that you have the bigger side when you're trying to slide back out of here. Now, a lot of people think this is pretty straightforward. Set your wires, go ahead and solder them. But that is actually not going to be correct. One of the biggest tips that I can give you here, that will probably be the most important part of this video, is before you slide this solder connector over your wires, you're going to want to bend your wires into U's. I like to use my fingernail. Go ahead and do that. Hook them together. And then bend them over each other. So this does a couple things. One, it keeps your wires exactly where they need to be while you're soldering. Two, it really makes sure these wires get meshed in together so that we have a pretty decent connection already without solder. And thirdly, it makes this a lot tougher. So if you just slide this over with your wires next to each other and you solder it, yes, this is melted onto both wires, so it's still going to be fairly strong, but there won't be any strength in your actual solder joint. And the other thing here is, if you have the wires next to each other and you melt that solder, the solder might melt in between them and just kind of push them apart and just be kind of chilling there. You want all of your wires intertwined with each other, and then the solder is just going to fill up all those tiny little crevices and go around the outside and really finish off that connection. If you put them next to each other, you're really relying a lot on the solder connection, and only God knows the quality of this solder, right? It's not the best solder in the world. So again, we got the big side facing that way. We obviously put this on before we attached our wires together. Now we're going to slide that right on over. And what you want to do is go ahead and line up this band of solder with the very middle of your connection there. And just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and clamp this side too, just because I haven't actually gotten to use these clamps since I bought them. I'm a little excited. And also, when you start to heat up wires and put your torch on here and everything starts to warm up, it will move and it will shift, and it can start to fall or go other ways. So if you have enough room on whatever project you're working on to hold both ends of it, by all means, definitely do that. It's not always the case. Sometimes you're going to be working in really tight areas and you won't be able to do that. But if you can, keep it as steady as possible. So just to recap, we did go ahead and strip our wires with our automatic stripper, and then we twisted them just a little bit to get them nice and straight. We gave them a little bit of a hook, bent them around the fingernail, hooked them together, and then kind of crumpled them together after they were hooked. Slid our connector back over, which of course you want to put this on before any of that. Slid over, now we're ready to solder. This is the PowerPro butane soldering kit. It's pretty cool. You fill it up with butane on the bottom with a little bottle, and you can adjust the temperature here by how much gas it releases, and then it's just on and off, and a lighter. I have the open end on there, so it's just going to have a flame coming out. And what we do is we go ahead and add this little shield here, which again, if you have a regular heat gun, you can usually get a shield attachment for that too. It'll most likely be a lot bigger than this because the heat gun has a bigger hole on the end, but it's the same idea. I love this thing because it's nice and small and there's no cord on it, so you can fit it into all kinds of tight areas. I've soldered many things underneath dashes of cars with this, so you're crawled up under the dash trying to solder some wires, and it fits in a lot of places. Alright, so the second most important thing, other than hooking your wires together, is going to be when you use this heat. A lot of people want to put a lot of heat into the solder because the solder takes the most heat to melt, and that's very true. To melt this solder, it's going to take a lot more time and heat than it will to melt this or this. But what I've found is when you're soldering things, especially when you're in conditions that aren't perfect and your wire's not this level, your wire's vertical, something like that. If this wire was vertical and I started heating up this solder, as soon as that solder gets hot, it's going to drip all the way down, and it might even drip out of our bare wire area. It might drip all the way down to here. So what I have started doing in recent years is heating up the sides first and sealing it off as much as I can, probably all the way to where the bare wire starts. We can go ahead and heat that up and melt it. And what that'll do is seal it all in there so that when we heat our solder up and our solder melts, it will have nowhere to go except for bare wire, and it won't try and escape. And again, this is really important when you're soldering weird places, weird angles, and all that stuff. Safety glasses, throw them on, especially if you're soldering above your head. On, max, you can hear the gas coming out. Always look in there to make sure the flame's going. We have flame. Normally you can see it in the reflection here, but it's pretty dirty. Again, I'm going to start with the bottom, melt it slightly, move to the top, melt it slightly, and then we'll move to the middle, and we'll try and get this in one foul swoop here. And remember, everything's going to heat up, so if you are soldering close to a control unit or anything like that, you need to be very careful because that heat will travel and you can damage components. So if you're near a control unit or something like that, you do want to unplug it if possible. Whatever wires you're working on, try and unplug that harness if you can. Let's move on to the center here. So that didn't melt as picturesque as I thought it would. You might not have even been able to tell on camera because sometimes this little band will completely disappear and it's very obvious. This one did not completely disappear, but the solder did melt. And it stayed in our area we wanted it to stay in. Don't set this anywhere, it'll catch anything on fire when you're done because it'll stay hot for a while. So mine's on the metal toolbox. But that's looking pretty good. I may have to take some pictures with my phone so you can kind of see the zoom. But this is clearly melted. You compare it to a fresh one. And as you can see, that solder did go downhill. So this is barely at an angle, barely tilted, but this is all clear right here and all silver right here. So as it melted, it did follow gravity, which makes a lot of sense. And that's why we kind of sealed up the edges first. Every once in a while you do one of these solder connectors, and by the time you get the solder heated up, it might burst, might crack through the plastic. And my advice there is if it pops a hole open, if you're on the interior of a car, somewhere that's sealed, you're probably okay. I would just wrap it with some good electrical tape or that harness tape or the bottle of like liquid electrical tape. That stuff's pretty freaking awesome. Unless you're working with, you know, some high voltage or some really particular cable, something like that, and it's near a bunch of other stuff and you really need good insulation, then you're gonna have to cut this out and redo it if it pops open, is what I'm talking about here. But if it pops open, it's one wire just, you know, going to 12 volts for something inside the car, it's all sealed up. You can liquid electrical tape it and then wrap it and you'll be fine. If it's something important, then you probably want to redo it. Don't ever try and fix SRS wires. Don't do any airbag stuff. If you mess something up on your car, it's not my fault. That's on you, bud. Don't forget your eye protection when you're soldering. Again, if you are trying to solder some harness or anything that's close to a control unit, unplug the harness if you can. If there's no other way to do it, then just really keep an eye on your heat. And if you're soldering, your control unit's downline, just kind of, you know, don't burn yourself, but feel the wire, see if it's getting hot. If you're putting a lot of heat through this wire, because it's a conductor, right? That heat's got to go somewhere. If you're putting a lot of heat through that wire, it can easily damage electrical components. So be careful, do it smart. But these connectors are beautiful. One of my favorite things I've discovered in the automotive world. And if you're trying to use them, just do those couple things. Twist your wire, hook your wire, and then hook them together. It'll get a little extra strength in there. And then to make life easier on you, just try and heat up the sides first and shorten your area for your solder so it doesn't escape. Otherwise, we're looking pretty good here. That's about it. Afterwards, you know, we would want to wrap it in this Tessa tape just to make it look professional. But I highly recommend that tape. It makes stuff look really good, makes stuff look OEM, which is really nice. Highly recommend the Power Probe soldering iron. It's freaking awesome. I'll try and put links to this stuff because I've gotten most of these things off Amazon. This obviously was Mack Truck, and Power Probe was also Mack Truck, but you can buy those things online. I'm sure someone watching this video will know where to get this where it's not Mack pricing. So if you do know, drop in the comments please, and I'll pin it. But those connectors are great. The automatic stripper is awesome, especially if you're doing a lot of wire repairs or you're trying to flat rate. The tape is great, and also liquid electrical tape. I didn't have that in the video here. I'll try and put a bottle of it up on the screen right now, but that stuff's pretty awesome just to get in some tight areas, or if you maybe nick a wire somewhere and it's not really a problem, but you did just damage the insulation a little bit, but you didn't really break the wire at all, then that stuff can be good for that kind of a scenario. And then these clips, these magnetic clips from Amazon, pretty freaking sweet. This was my first test run. This was my first test run of these, but I love them. They remind me of Spider-Man, but Doc Ock, but they're awesome. So that's everything I recommend for wire repairs. That is the best way I know how to do it. If you have any ideas, comments, anything I did wrong, go ahead and drop it below. But that's kind of the method that I was taught and modified and came up with my own things to add to it over the years, but that's where I'm at right now. And the only things I really forgot in this video was I forgot to bring real dikes and liquid electrical tape. Otherwise, that's pretty much everything you need to do wire repairs. And none of this stuff is very expensive, which is pretty cool. The Power Probe is probably the most, and it's not too bad. I'm rambling, so we're going to stop this video. But again, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you can. Watch some other videos. Watch my tool video if you like the tools in this video. And any knowledge on wire repairs, drop it below so everyone can learn from everybody. That's what we're here for. Thanks again, guys. Have a great rest of your day or night. As always, peace.